Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for Let's Have a Conversation. Today's guest is Jill Peckenpaugh, and she is with the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants in Albany. And I am thrilled that Jill is here. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself, her early upbringings, and her career path. Jill, thank you for joining us.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. I do want to point out to everybody that Jill's mom and sister live at Beltrone Living Center, so we have had the opportunity to get to know the family very well. Beautiful family, and in fact, if you get Senior Connections, Jill's mom, Ruth, was written up as one of our women of distinction. I think the second one, maybe the first one. Anyways, if you should go back and look at that Senior Connection, because mother had an incredible career as well. So Jill, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up then in suburbs of Chicago, most of my life in Des Plaines, a little bit of Glenview and Evanston, and then Des Plaines from ages 8 to 18, so I graduated high school there.
Okay. And so, all right, growing up, so I know you have one sister, Janice. Is there any other brothers or sisters?
I'm the well-adjusted middle child.
Okay.
They have an older brother, Scott, who's 2 years older, and then Janice, who's 3 years younger.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So was your upbringing in a kind of a suburban community, is that correct?
Suburban community, and my father was a minister and my mother was a nurse, so we were very much involved in the community, and really growing up next door to the church literally meant we always had people in our home, and we were in the church. I used to practice piano in the church. Even as a little kid, I'd take the ring of keys and go practice in the big church, and if they had a special concert with a harpsichord, I'd get to play on a harpsichord as well. And yeah, so we were very much in the community, and brownies and Girl Scouts and church choirs and all those good things.
So a lot of musical influence.
Yeah, my mom started singing when she was a little girl on a church radio. They put her on a soapbox or whatever, like 4, singing little hymns. And I've not done as much with my voice or had the same voice, but yeah, always choirs. I always say I'm a sing-alonger.
I think most of us are, to be honest.
It's true.
You wait for that dominant voice and follow suit, yeah. So harpsichord, is that a lot different from a piano?
Just sounds lovely, and you play old English things on it or something, and it sounds more fun.
Is it the same keys as a piano?
Enough that I could do it without any extra instruction. Yeah, I actually played cello growing up, 4th grade through 8th grade, I think. And my brother and I were both involved in speech contests at a junior high kind of age. That was fun. One year it was the first year that they allowed girls to compete, but they allowed girls to compete, but they had separate contests. So I won the girls contest. I think there were only 2 of us competing, and he won the boys contest, which was more of it. So there was the local newspaper did a little, sister and brother team.
So oratorical, right?
Oratorical, yeah. And then it was like they gave us a topic, and then we had to write a speech. So we did that a few years in a row. Okay. And then in high school, we were both in speech team and musicals and variety shows and that kind of thing. So that was something I did with my big brother. And I always attribute my sister Janice to teaching me skills of patience and inclusivity, of learning to be around people with disabilities and the gifts that they bring. Yeah, and then the whole church community. So I felt very supported as a child in all ways.
That's really great. I have to say, your sister Janice is one of the most positive people I know. And it happens that both Janice and I are both born in August. So she always lets me know how many stars my day is. A couple of times she's like, "You're having a 5-star day," and I said, "Janice, I think somebody's stolen a couple of my stars." So she's just a delight to have here.
That's great. Yeah. I like hearing that.
Yeah. So you finished high school, and so what did you decide at that point you were going to go on and be or do?
Well, I did an AFS, foreign exchange student year in Italy. So I wasn't willing to give up my last year of high school, my senior year, because of all the social reasons. And so I did an extra year of high school in Italy. And at that stage, at least, we didn't get to pick what country we went to, so we just applied and went through all these levels of interviews to get to do this scholarship program. And then they told me Italy, and this was 1978, so it was before everybody was going to Europe. Pesto wasn't a household word.
Pasta wasn't even a household
Word, I can't say that. Everything was, spaghetti or macaroni and cheese. And so it was really quite different. It felt like I was going back in time about 40 years. And it was a great experience living in another place, learning the language. I didn't speak any Italian before I got there. I had studied Spanish, but never did very well at it. So really enjoyed learning the language. I lived with an Italian family that had 6 kids, and they ranged from ages 13 to 25. So at 17, I was right in the middle, and it just was a life-changing, amazing experience. My first airplane was flying from Chicago to JFK, and my second was JFK to Europe. My parents had never been out of the country except maybe going over the border in Ontario. My grandparents were from Michigan. And yeah, it was a phenomenal year. And then I'm sure that, led me to doing international work after that later on.
Now, what part of Italy? I'm just curious.
In the north, outside of Milan, in a little town of 1,200 called Costa di Mezzate, which is outside of Bergamo, is what most people would know.
Oh, that's wonderful. Italy's really such a beautiful country. Now, I've gone there. My husband's done his genealogy, and it's funny, I've gone and we've stayed in these little villages, and it's like, they shut down in the afternoon, they open back up in the evening. And I say those are National Geographic moments, because it's something you'll never experience in the United States. I would assume might be similar to where you stayed?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I've always thought I belong in Europe and Italy because I'd love to do that siesta and then get up and go again. And
it's like a little break, nap time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. No, I did not know that about you. So can you still speak Italian?
I can, yeah. I feel like maybe my brain was just young enough that it really stuck in there. Yeah.
And the family you stayed with, did they speak English?
No.
So you had to learn Italian.
Learn it, yeah. But I got the best family.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Really,
Do you stay in
great.
touch with them?
I do. I mean, periodically, I'm sort of the prodigal daughter. I could call them and tell them I was coming to Italy in 3 weeks, and they'd roll out the red carpet. And
Now, have any of them come here?
a little bit. One of the brothers in the family had been an exchange student to the U.S., so he did speak English, but he was already 25 and on his way to getting married, almost out of the house when I got there. And I sound like I got a little grovel trying to get past that. So his widow, he died a few years after I was there.
Oh, sorry.
And his widow and son came, have been here to the U.S. a few times, and his son went to law school in New York City. So I got to play kind of the aunt and help him set up in his dorm room and things like that.
Oh,
so,
that's wonderful.
but those are the only ones. It's just that
That's
widow and the son.
wonderful. Now, so you came back from your year abroad and you go to college?
I
I
did.
started college at University of Illinois in Chicago. Moved back in with Mom. Janice was away at a boarding school for visually impaired, doing really well there. And, I feel like the first 2 years of school, I say to young people now, you can do anywhere because it's going to be psychology 101 or whatever. And you don't have to pay the
English
big bucks for the first years. Exactly. Having said that, going to school in Chicago at age 18, at a school where the average age was 26, and it was more interesting to be in Sociology 101 with a more diverse group than if I'd gone to the small liberal arts Christian college that I had planned to go to before the year in Italy. So it worked out. So I did 2 years at Chicago Circle, it's called, at University of Illinois at Chicago Circle in Chicago. And then I moved to Wisconsin because I got clear that I wanted to get an undergraduate degree in international relations. And at the time, there were only a few places in the country that offered that, which seems hard to believe now because it seems like it's everywhere, global everything now. But a lot of places you'd have to get an undergrad in poli-sci and then a master's degree in international relations. So I decided to move to Wisconsin, to Madison, Wisconsin, and I moved and took a year off from school to avoid the out-of-state tuition and establish residency. So I worked in an Italian deli that year. I figured that's where I had the edge on the college students. And then finished school at University of Wisconsin in Madison. Took 3 years to finish, which was kind of a 5-year college stint was normal for undergrads in Wisconsin. And so I was 25 when I finished my undergrad because of the years off. And was in Wisconsin, I was living for 2 years in a church house. The Episcopal Church had a health service students, and we do basically the housework for the church, mopping the sanctuary floor or whatever, in exchange for rent. So it was a good deal. Yeah. And there were group meals. It was, again, an experience of living in community. And they became a sanctuary site while I was living there. It was Central American refugees were undocumented at the time, did not qualify for refugee status, in part, not to get too political, but in part because the U.S. government was supporting the civil wars there. So we ended up housing students and adults and a family from El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, and we'd take them around in their bandanas to share their stories. So that influenced me a lot, and I took Latin American history classes then, and so that was my first experience of refugees. And I have to be careful. My career story, I can go on too much about all of it. So let's see.
So did you actually live with these individuals? So you're in the same store. Okay, so that's really kind of an immersion into that, if you think about it.
It's at the time, and one of them had a 4-year-old daughter. The intent wasn't to have a family living with all these students, but when they went to the border in Arizona and started with a Honduran student who'd been telling the peasants that they had rights to land. Honduran, yes. That made the government not happy to be telling them of their own rights. And so that's what got him jailed. And then he coerced the chaplain that went down to get people that this man and woman and their adorable 4-year-old who'd become his friends in prison also needed a place. So, yeah.
So it was quite an experience.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful chapter. I'm sure you look back on that with thinking how fortunate you were to have had that. I mean, people go to school for all sorts of subjects and never get to actually practice them while they're in school.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from Wisconsin, where did you go?
So from Wisconsin, I stalled for a little bit to wait for a college boyfriend to finish his grad degree, and I took linguistics classes. Figured out I could defer my student loans a little longer if I took some classes. So, and I thought maybe I'd do grad school in linguistics. So I took linguistics classes, and I also wanted to study a non-Indo-European language because at that point I had studied Spanish in high school and then learned the Italian and then also studied French just to complete the Romance languages. And so then I studied Thai. I was working my way through undergrad, waitressing in a Thai restaurant and working at an Italian deli. And so that was a great experience. I didn't realize till years later how rare that was, that in Wisconsin you could even study Thai. They had some kind of Asian degree, and there were only 8 people in the class. So every 8th person, it was my turn. You had to really be up on your homework, and I learned a lot. I learned how to write the little squiggly letters and all that, so that was really fun. And then my boyfriend got a job in Washington, D.C. Actually got offers in different places, but we figured Washington was a good place for my international relations degree also. So we moved there, and I ended up working for a nonprofit that an educational nonprofit that did public policy workshops for corporate executives. And I did logistics. So I got to go to Capitol Hill and work with, it was nonpartisan. So our speakers were a lot of former White House staff, both sides of the aisle. I can't. It's just such a rich experience. I could talk forever on that, but taught me really good logistical skills, and yeah, I got to meet a lot of famous people. Bob Dole,
Wow.
Jesse Jackson kissed me on the cheek, and lots of people. At
Sounds
the
like a
time.
great chapter. Great chapter.
It was really fun. Yeah.
Now, how long did you stay at that nonprofit?
2.5 years.
And then again, following the same boyfriend to Boston, where his family was from. And I interviewed then for both assisting refugees jobs, and also at John Hancock, who was one of the clients. You know, so there's kind of a theme of networking, as we all do. But so a lot of it's on a first name basis with the top management at John Hancock because of these seminars in Washington. So you know how you do informational interviewing and you're supposed to ask for 2 more names every time. Well, they would just give me, oh, you should go talk to so-and-so, you know. So I talked to people in the accounting department and all kinds of departments, and I had no interest in working for a big corporate. Like, I was so anti-corporate after the nonprofit and everything. And then I got to a point where I was interviewing in the international department, the marketing unit, to do a training and communications job. And I felt like, all right, I'll do it, you know. And it paid considerably more than the refugees job, which I think the interview on that pretty much ended when they asked me, what would you do if somebody pulled a knife? And I had no answer. You know, now I've
Quite
faced all
scenario
kinds of
question.
manner of situations that nothing would face me, but the time that was shocking. So I ended up working at John Hancock in this international department for quite a few years, doing writing and editing of country profiles, where it was looking at each of like they had a network of 45 different companies. They did multinational pooling of benefits for corporations, and I'd interface with the representatives from the insurance companies in these different countries, and then when they'd come and visit, I'd coordinate the training with the salespeople, and also I'd edit these country profiles that talked about what Social Security in their country covered, and then what insurance private benefits they needed to supplement it for the corporate clients. Anyway,
Wow.
so it honed my writing skills,
Yeah.
and also at that time, John Hancock Financial Services offered a tuition award program. So I was able to get a master's in training and development.
Nice.
So for my undergrad, I was going to school full-time and working part-time on weekends and breaks. And then for my master's, I was working full-time and going to school part-time for 2.5 years, every Monday night from 6 to 10 p.m. That was my master's. But that was great because I got to experience a lot of people that did training and learned that I really liked the development, kind of the organizational development part best. And after leaving John Hancock, I did some organizational development consulting. 9/11 happened. I was happy to not be working in a 60-story building in downtown Boston, and eventually moved to Connecticut to be with friends, and then ended up volunteering internationally. I'd always wanted to international volunteer, and I came into a free ticket anywhere. So decided to go to Thailand, where I had these language skills that I hadn't used from 20 years before. So I volunteered with an organization called Cross Cultural Solutions. I taught
English as a second language in a school in Bangkok. And then I
was so impressed with the customer service skills and kind of quality assurance of this particular nonprofit. And I had done quality consulting. I was the quality consultant at John Hancock when they were going through that whole program, and I just, really appreciated good quality. So I offered pro bono services to this little nonprofit, thinking I'd facilitate a board meeting or something. And they ended up a few months later calling me in and saying that they're head of their program management department had left, and they'd like me to interview for the job. And I was like, oh, I don't think I really, And so I ended up working for them for 4 years and preparing. It was a growth period for them, so preparing. Went from 1,000 to 4,000 volunteers for their overseas experience. So if you were going to go to
Costa Rica for 2 weeks to volunteer in an orphanage,
our staff would figure out all the things you needed to know, all the shots you needed to get, some language lessons, learn about the history and all that before you went. So it's they still do really great work, Cross-Cultural Solutions. If anybody wants to.
That's wonderful. So that's
volunteer.
Thai people traveling to other countries.
No, Americans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Having
All right. Gotcha.
of volunteering, but in another country.
Yeah. Is it like people to people? Is it little people, younger people, or is it adults or?
All
Okay.
families go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great.
So that was great.
Yeah.
And then I followed a different love to Albany.
Okay.
And there was a point where I wasn't working at the nonprofit anymore. I was again doing consulting, so I really didn't need to stay in New Rochelle, New York, where I was living at the time, and moved to Albany. And the relationship didn't last, but I got this great job working with refugees, and I've been doing that now for 12 years.
Wow. Well, tell everybody what USCRI actually is and does.
So, USCRI is the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, and we both resettle refugees that are newly arriving through the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program, and serve refugees and immigrants with a variety of programs, from helping them get jobs, certainly with the new arrivals, registering the kids for school and getting health appointments and all those things they need. And then at this stage, we have lots of focus programs. So we have a program focused on seniors that we've had conversations about, and one focused on youth, where we pair mentors in the community with youth ages 14 to 24 and help them with their educational and career goals. Lots of other things I'm forgetting. We just got a slew of new grants, so we're doing things around citizenship and yeah.
So what countries, I know it kind of ebbs and flows, I would assume, depending upon world politics and what's going on, but currently, where do you see your refugees coming from?
Mostly from Afghanistan, also a lot of Christian Ukrainians in recent years, and people from Burma, came in larger numbers years before, but we still get people that have family members joining them. Mm-hmm. And we expect in the coming years the numbers of refugees will increase. We're waiting to hear the presidential determination for the maximum number of refugees that can come each year. Mm-hmm. Hasn't been set yet, but we're expecting it like 62,000 or so. And then we'd expect to see more Syrians who used to come in 2016 and some other populations. There's also a lot of Congolese that have come in recent years, and we expect that to continue.
Yeah. It's amazing how many refugees that you welcome into our region, our community. I'm just wondering, what is the greatest benefit, or maybe what's the greatest challenge in doing the job you currently do?
Welcomed over 4,500 refugees since 2005. That's when the Albany office of USCRI, which we sound like a government agency, but we're a nonprofit. And locally, we're a very small nonprofit, and we utilize lots of volunteers, even while we've been working mostly remotely in these months. And certainly, we hope to open our doors again to visitors, but all the programs have continued. In terms of what I love about my job is the variety, and I feel like it uses all of my skills from, patience, creativity. It's a lot of juggling. I feel like I'm constantly doing kind of a jigsaw puzzle, or the guy at the circus that has all the spinning plates and, one's wobbling and you run down there and do it. And I say that I need like a zoom lens. So it's the big picture, and we've talked about some of the big picture stuff that's going on, and then zooming down to the details. And of course, there's a lot of administrative work, as there is in your work as well. And reviewing case files and approving timesheets and grant writing and all those kinds of things. Yeah. In terms of challenges, it's both. What I love is that it's very interconnected with the community, but that also can present challenges. And certainly in recent years, the political picture and anti-immigration, has led to things. There's been anti-Asian rhetoric recently. There was the Muslim ban years ago. So all those things affect different factions of our populations, and also just overall inclusivity. And certainly we're working against racism and
Right.
things like that.
Things like that.
Right, just even perception, been tough, I would assume.
Yeah, it's challenging. And yet I love doing this, and I'm honored to do this work that's so in line with my values and interests. It's really such a pleasure to get to do something you care about.
What an incredible life path you have had. Your career path, your life path. You don't seem to be one that is afraid to take a chance or a risk and say, let's try this. Or you go to Italy and you nail it. You go to Thailand, you nail it. It's just pretty amazing. What advice would you give a younger woman or even an older woman who's contemplating a career change if they were interested in going into something with human services or helping immigration or refugees? What advice would you give them?
I think the advice I'd give anybody for any career is to get some real life experience. So whether it's volunteering or interning in an office, I think so often I say this, that the abstract of helping a refugee and the reality of helping a refugee, there's like worlds of difference, because the abstract is that our heart goes out. We see that these are people that have fled war or persecution on account of race, religion, ethnicity, or belonging to a certain political or social group. We see the images of people fleeing on TV, and we want to help. And we saw a real outpouring of volunteers when the Syrian crisis, not that it's ever stopped, but when it was making big news in like 2016. And there was such a flood of volunteers. And then they would realize how hard it is to navigate our culture if you don't speak the language yet, if you're just learning English, or if you're needing to initially live on food stamps and temporary assistance. And volunteers that have never had to navigate those programs are just in shock of what it takes. So I think volunteering with an organization like ours, or interning in an office if a young person has an idea of wanting to be an accountant or in human services, whatever field, there's always an opportunity to get a more hands-on approach. And you may find that, it really involves office work, and I don't like office work. I like being outside, maybe, or working with people that are still learning English. Maybe that's a great thing for you, and you love it, and you love seeing people change from point A to point B and thrive and move on with their lives. Or maybe you need something that's more, black and white and clear paths. So I think it's about getting your hands dirty and a realistic impression of what goes on in whatever you're interested in, and then you can see if your skills and interests and personalities go with that or not.
That's absolutely great advice. I want to say, in regards to the empathy piece, the recent news where there was those two little sisters, and they literally threw them over the fence, and the little boy who was lost in the desert and just is, really upset, and he's speaking in Spanish. And I think people probably sing at home in their lazy boy rockers watching that, their heart goes out to those small children. So I would assume, as things kind of unwind here in the United States and policy and procedure come forth, that you would have a lot of people interested in assisting, again, similar to the Syrian refugees, but maybe a little closer to home.
Yeah, and USCRI on a national level gets involved in a lot of things, serving victims of human trafficking, advocacy at the border, supporting the unaccompanied minor children. So if people go to the USCRI website or Facebook page, they can learn about a lot of different programs. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of different organizations as well.
Well, Jill, on behalf of Colony Senior Service Centers, all of our staff and our board, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your story. It's really been our pleasure.
Thanks for the opportunity, Diane.